Hey, Changemaker! Welcome to Learning for Good, the only podcast that teaches nonprofit leaders how to leverage training to drive performance, improve capacity, and fuel their mission impact. Do you ever feel like your nonprofit is growing, but your people just aren't keeping up? Or like you're fixing the same problems over and over? Do you wonder how to build confident, capable staff who know how to lead, not just execute? If we haven't met yet, I'm Heather, and I know how hard it can feel to get people to do what's expected of them. Trust me, I have 3 kids. I've tried telling people what to do and how. I've tried the traditional training approaches, and I realized that just doesn't work. And that's when I started researching what does work. Now, I help mission-driven leaders use learning to drive performance, build capacity, and make change that lasts. And I'm sharing it all on this podcast. So block your calendar, turn off your Teams or Slack chat, and let's dive in. It's Learning for Good.
As a nonprofit consultant, I often get asked how working with nonprofits is different than working in other industries. And one of the many answers I share is how collaborative nonprofits tend to be. There is this real desire to include people in projects and processes. So it's not uncommon for me as a learning designer to have multiple people on my project team and to gain access to the intended audience that I'm creating for. And I think this is such an amazing thing. Collaboration provides so many benefits to the end product, but it also comes with some challenges. It slows things down. For example, a project that might only require a few weeks of work might suddenly require months. And it's usually worth that extra time, but it is extra time. But one challenge that is a bit harder to solve for is decision making. If we're all working together on this project, who owns it? Who gets that final decision? It can get a little bit muddy, but it doesn't have to. And so that's what I want to explore today. How do we create inclusive decision-making practices in our organizations? Let's dive in. It's Learning for Good. Inclusive decision-making. It sounds so good, but it can feel hard in practice, especially when we're working collaboratively on projects. So I want to share a few things I do to facilitate inclusive decision-making in my learning and leadership development projects. These tips will translate to other types of projects as well. So get your pen ready, get your pencil ready, whatever you want to write with. I think you're going to want to take notes on this one. All right, lesson 1. Start every project with a kickoff where you can set expectations. Now, I have episodes all about project kickoffs and leading project meetings, so I'm not going to spend too much time here, but this is important. You need a kickoff, a starting point. And you need to be clear on those roles and responsibilities up front. We'll talk more about that later. Lesson 2, make sure everyone who needs to be in the room is in the room. So during my project kickoff, I want to make sure we've identified all the possible voices that need to be heard during the project. Now, just because we're being inclusive doesn't mean everyone is involved. But we do need to be intentional and make sure we have diversity of thought in the room and diversity of experience too. So people you might want to include in your project in some way. The people who will be impacted by the project, and those who will be expected to implement whatever it is, people who hold lived experience, and people who have expertise to share. The actual people will vary by project, but for a learning project, I might have a project sponsor, a subject matter expert, a key business partner, right? All of these people might be on that immediate team. And then we might use specific meetings or opportunities like focus groups to hear other voices, like the voices of those who are impacted by the project. I found a good project team size to be 3 to 4 people with the expectation that we're going to bring other people in as needed. We want to make sure everyone who needs to be heard has the opportunity to be heard in the project. That's part of creating this inclusive decision-making practice. Lesson 3, get clear on roles and responsibilities. I mentioned this when I was talking about the project kickoff meeting, because this is one of those things that we need to discuss up front during that meeting. Who is doing what during the project? And this is another one that I won't go into detail on, but it's important that everyone understands the expectations and that they understand those expectations from the beginning. Lesson 4, get clear on how decisions will be made. And this is part of clarifying those roles and responsibilities. I worked for a senior VP once who said, you get a voice, not a vote, meaning we could give our input and she wanted it, but the ultimate decision was hers. It was clear, and clear is kind. And I hope she's listening to this and that story makes her smile. So who gets the decision and how? Is it going to be directive? Probably not if you have so many voices at the table. There are decisions that need to be directive, though. That just means that the leader makes the decision without input. It's their decision and they need to go. A decision could also be consultative, meaning everyone discusses and the leader decides based on that input. So this is the voice, not a vote example. A decision could also be a consensus, meaning everyone decides together. This one is hard to do, in my opinion, because what happens if there isn't agreement? For me, as a learning and leadership development pro, most of my projects, I would say, are consultative. We include lots of voices throughout the project. There's lots of input, but someone owns the decision at the end. I find this to be one of the easiest ways to work, but there are definitely cases for directive or consensus decision-making. Here's what really matters most. Everyone knows how the decision will be made and who owns it. Again, clear is kind. When we don't have this clarity, that's when decisions get stalled or people get frustrated. We need to be clear. Lesson 5, co-create group norms. How do you want to be together as a group? If they're participating in this project, what does participation mean? What are the expectations you have of yourself? What are the expectations you have of each other? These are things that impact the group norms, and they should be co-created, discussed, and decided on as a group. Lesson 6, include a variety of ways for people to have their voices heard. I use a lot of open questions in meetings, and this is great for discussion. That's one way for people to have their voice heard. But you want to create a space where everyone feels comfortable sharing. So sometimes this might mean breaking into smaller groups and having small group discussions. Sometimes this might mean using like dot voting or something like that, where people can use sticky dots to share their opinions, right? It's something that is a little less verbal, but still allows people to share their thoughts and their opinions. Sometimes it might mean surveys so that you have some more anonymity that you're able to provide. We just need to make sure that everyone feels comfortable speaking and sharing their thoughts and ideas in different ways. Lesson 7, use empathy. We want to always be thinking about other people, and we want to empathize with their experiences. So who is impacted by this project or this decision? And what ways will they be impacted? Who might be left out? Who aren't we thinking about? From a learning perspective, a great example of this is designing for accessibility. We have to understand how people will experience things, whatever it is we create, so that we can design in a way that is accessible for all. And this is true for all projects. We need to lead with empathy. Lesson 8, document the decision. And this one, honestly, is where I'm probably the weakest on the list. Document the decision. I don't know how many times on collaborative projects we've circled back to the same discussion. It's natural. But if a decision has been made, it isn't efficient. So when decisions get made, document them clearly. I worked for a client last year who needed to update some existing courses for educators, and there were a lot of moving pieces and parts. So they had a project manager who was dedicated to this project. This project manager was so good about documenting our decisions. And sure enough, every time we would go back and resurface a discussion, she could go back to her notes and let us know what was decided. And it was so helpful. So document it. Lesson 9, schedule a project debrief. When you reach the end of your project, you want to learn from that experience. Schedule a debrief so you can hear from everyone on the team. What went well, what could be improved. I have an episode about project debriefs as well, so I'll link to that in the show notes. But we want to make sure we have an opportunity for people to share their experience so that we can learn from that. And then finally, lesson 10, add personal reflection and planning. So after the debrief, spend some time reflecting on what people shared and what changes you need to make in the future to ensure inclusive decision-making in your future projects. All right, that was a lot. I hope you took notes, but if not, come back and re-listen to this episode. There's so much stuff in this one short episode, and it's going to make a huge difference in your projects. I hope that you'll start including inclusive decision-making practices if you aren't already. They make such a difference. I'll see you next time on Learning for Good.
Hey friend, was this episode helpful for you? Did you like what you heard? Do you want more content like this? Here are 3 things you can do. Hit subscribe, leave a review on Apple Podcasts or your podcast app of choice, share this episode with a colleague. This means so much to me personally. I read every review, but it also helps me learn what content you like most so I can create more of what you want. All right, turn that Teams or Slack chat back on when you're ready, and I'll see you next time on Learning for Good.